Have you ever felt guilty? Even when no one knew what you did? No camera. No punishment. No consequences. Just you, alone, and that quiet sense that something wasn't right. Atheism offers explanations for guilt. Social conditioning. Evolution. Psychology. And many of those explanations make sense. But here's the strange part. Why does guilt still accuse us? Even when there is nothing to gain by feeling it? Why does it speak in the language of, you shouldn't have? Instead of, this was inconvenient. Tonight, we're not asking whether guilt is useful. We're asking something quieter. Why does it feel like someone is watching? Even when no one is? There is a strange human experience that most of us recognize instantly. Even if we struggle to explain it. You do something small. Private. Unnoticed. No one sees it. No one will ever know. And yet, later that night, it returns. Not as fear. Not as anxiety about consequences. But as a quiet inner pressure. Guilt. Not the dramatic kind. Not the public shame of being exposed. Just a subtle sense that something is wrong. You replay the moment in your mind. You justify it. You explain it to yourself. And yet the feeling remains. This video is not about morality in the religious sense. It's not about rules, commandments, or divine judgment. It's about something more intimate. Why does guilt exist inside us? Even when it serves no social purpose? Why does it follow us into silence? Part 1. Guilt without eyes. Imagine a simple scenario. You find a wallet on the street. There is cash inside. No ID. No cameras. No witnesses. You keep the money. Objectively, nothing happens. No punishment. No social fallout. No practical downside. And yet, later, something presses in. Not fear of being caught. Not concern for reputation. Just the sense that something about the act doesn't sit right. Or consider another moment. You lie, but only to yourself. No one else hears it. You rationalize a decision. You excuse a behavior. And still, something inside resists. You didn't lose anything. You didn't risk anything. So why does the mind return to the moment? Why does it accuse? Guilt appears even when no one is harmed. No one knows. No consequences follow. No reward is gained by feeling it. That alone makes guilt psychologically unusual. Most emotions track outcomes. Fear tracks danger. Desire tracks reward. Anxiety tracks uncertainty. But guilt often appears when the situation is already over. It doesn't protect us. It doesn't benefit us. It judges us, after the fact. Part 2. The Atheist Explanations. Modern atheism does not deny guilt. It explains it. And to be fair, many of these explanations are insightful and partially convincing. Let's take them seriously. 1. Social conditioning. We feel guilty because society trained us to. From childhood, we internalize rules. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't betray trust. Even when no one is watching, those rules remain. Guilt, on this view, is simply society echoing inside us. This explains why guilt often matches cultural norms. 2. Evolutionary advantage. Another explanation is evolutionary. Guilt helped our ancestors survive. Those who felt guilt were more cooperative, more trustworthy, more likely to stay in the group. Natural selection favored guilt because it stabilized social bonds. On this view, guilt is a biological adaptation, nothing more. 3. Psychological mechanisms. Psychology adds another layer. Guilt arises from cognitive dissonance, from self-image conflict, from internalized expectations. We want to see ourselves as good, and guilt emerges when our actions threaten that image. These explanations are not foolish. They are thoughtful. They explain many features of guilt. But here is where the tension begins. Part 3. Where those explanations strain. If guilt were only social conditioning, why does it persist when society is absent? Why does it judge us in situations where no social rule was enforced? If guilt were only evolutionary, Why does it punish us even when punishment reduces our well-being? Evolution favors efficiency. Guilt often sabotages happiness. If guilt were only psychological self-image, why does it sometimes accuse us against our self-interest? Why does it feel less like discomfort and more like indictment? Here is the strange thing. We don't experience guilt as a feeling we chose. We experience it as something that addresses us. It speaks in sentences. You shouldn't have done that. That wasn't right. You know better. Notice the grammar. Not. That was inefficient. That reduced survival odds. But. You were wrong. Wrong implies a standard. A reference point. A measure that exists before our preferences. And this is where explanation becomes difficult. Part 4. The strange authority of conscience. We don't argue with hunger. We don't negotiate with thirst. But we argue with guilt. We justify. We excuse. We bargain. Why? Because guilt behaves less like an impulse and more like a voice with authority. It doesn't merely inform. It demands. It doesn't say, "This made you uncomfortable." It says, "This ought not to have happened." And here is the quiet paradox. Even when we reject moral realism, even when we deny objective meaning, guilt still speaks as if something is objectively the case. As if we are accountable, not to society, but to something within us that does not ask for permission. Atheism can explain the origin of guilt. What it struggles to explain is its authority. Why does conscience feel less like a tool we use and more like a judge we answer to? Conclusion: the question that remains. This video is not claiming guilt proves anything. It is simply noticing something odd. In a universe where nothing ultimately matters, where moral norms are social constructs, where meaning is self-assigned, why does guilt refuse to behave like a suggestion? Why does it follow us into silence? Into solitude? Into moments where no benefit remains? You don't have to answer that tonight. But perhaps the next time guilt appears, quiet, unwanted, uninvited, ask yourself, what exactly is speaking to me right now? And why does it sound like judgment? Even when no one is watching?